Agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, order authorizing city staff to take the necessary steps to make the results of restaurant inspections available on the city website. Requested action, to adopt the order authorizing city staff to take the necessary steps to make the results of restaurant inspections available on the city website.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Chance, seconded by Councilor Christ. Any discussion on the council? Hearing none. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this? If you just, yes, sir, right up there.
Hello, excuse me. My name is Paul Landry. I'm chef owner of Fishbones American Grill in downtown Lewiston. My only concerns are with respect to posting on the website. I don't have any problems with posting and whatnot, as long as I guess it's a fair process. I'm not sure if the city's willing or ready to educate the public along with the owner-operators to make sure that, they really understand what that pass-fail is, because when you're looking at that pass or fail, that can mean a number of things, and no one's going to hit that button and say, okay, what exactly is going on here? What did they miss on the last time? I would dare say that we may want to consider our own bill instead of adopting another city's bill that would convey the same messaging, that would educate the public, that would respect the operators that are trying to do a good job, that are in the city doing their thing. I just think that it's really subjective, and unless we're ready to commit additional people to work with Sue to help educate the public, to make sure that we're getting back to operators that may have failed an inspection, to ensure that they're getting due diligence and whatnot, because that could be a death blow for a lot of people. I've never experienced it in the 20 years I've been doing business in LA. I've always passed my inspections. I have an open kitchen. I welcome anybody to come in there, and I certainly encourage good sanitary practices. I just want to make sure that we understand what's going to be posted in that bill, and that the public understands, so they're not just condemning willy-nilly because it happened to say pass or fail on the bill. I just want to make sure that we're giving a good thought about the messaging that's going in there. I want to make sure that people are giving an adequate amount of time to fix the problems, and I want to make sure that when they are fixed, that there's going to be as much fanfare when it's reposted that an operator has passed his bill and that this was the issue. If we're not going to get into detail on that posting and people have to do this wide search to try to find out what happened, what was positive, what was negative, I just think we're opening a big can of worms that really doesn't need to be open in the city. So I would encourage a better bill, a bill that would or an ordinance that would encourage public education, and hopefully you'll see that as well.
So what you're saying, basically, we've done this with the landlords, okay? We have this, what's it called, the bill there for the landlords. Oh, the disorderly bill with the landlords. And we're working with them to put something together that's acceptable to everybody, okay? Certainly nobody up here knows anything about the restaurant business. And maybe before we do something like this, we should sit down and talk to the restaurant owners and get a grasp of what's going on here, so that when we do make the amendment, it'll be a fair, if we do make this ordinance, it'll be a fair ordinance, and everybody will have had input into it.
I certainly think that would be the best solution for all people that are concerned, because I would dare say, you've got a health inspector working in your code enforcement. She knows all about restaurants, and most code enforcement people do, about their respective places. You folks would, I think, would be better served before you vote on an ordinance to have a profound understanding of that ordinance and the impacts, both positive and negative, that it could have on the industry. You know, Lewiston's been very business-friendly. I would hate to see people that would not elect to come to Lewiston Auburn area because of some specious ordinance.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak?
Good evening. My name is Pauline Goodis. I reside at Raymond Avenue in Lewiston. And it's not a matter of an ordinance or a bill. It's a policy the city would undertake at putting up whether or not a restaurant passed or failed. If they follow the same procedure that Portland's been using, it would say, yes, the restaurant passed or failed, but it would also post why it didn't pass or why it did pass. And I think that's important information for the consumer. It's public information. I mean, anyone off the street can walk into City Hall, go upstairs, ask for the list of what restaurants were inspected this week, and did they pass or fail, and could anonymously put them up on the internet, which would be more detrimental to the local restaurants. I find that it's very informative. I know that when my husband and I dine out in Portland, I have no problem going to Portland's website, checking out a restaurant. There are minor issues that a restaurant could fail, and if you look at the inspection report, it says whether or not it was fixed that day. It could be something as innocuous as not having a soap dispenser where the employees wash their hands. Restaurants get busy, people understand that. But when you're finding rat killer chemicals where food's being stored, or employees that are constantly not washing their hands, or food's not being served at the proper temperature or stored at the proper temperature, I, as a consumer, have a right to know that. And I think that the public has a right to know. It is public information. I mean, I would urge the City Council to put this up. I don't think there needs to be a negotiation between the restaurants and the city as to what we should put up or not put up. It's public information. Restaurants know what they need to be in compliance with. They know what the state laws are in regards to sanitation, proper storage of food, and chemicals. If they don't know that, then they perhaps ought not be open. I know Sue Rennie does a lot of education with restaurants on some that have not passed inspections. She spends a lot of time making sure they're brought up to speed. It's my understanding under state law, they have to have someone certified at all times in a restaurant that it's a certified sanitation person. Cersei, thank you. If the restaurant's doing what they need to do, what do they have to hide? I think that restaurants in Lewiston Auburn are very much following the system and should not be afraid to have their inspections listed. The ones that are going to be afraid are the ones that continue to not pass their inspections. And if the city's going to take a look at, maybe we need to negotiate with the restaurants before we make this information public, maybe we should negotiate with the restaurants and say, if you don't pass your inspection, we close you until you do pass. Now that is a really harsh alternative. Let the consumer make the decision as to whether they want to go to a restaurant. Mr. Landry, your restaurant is one of our favorites. And you're right, it's very open to the public as far as your cooking. There are other restaurants in town that continually don't pass their inspections. And I think the public has a right to know. And I would compare the restaurant inspections, it's not the best analogy, but it's no different than if someone gets arrested for a crime and charged. That's put in the newspaper. It doesn't mean they're guilty. And I think compare it to that. If we're not going to list restaurant inspections, maybe we should stop putting in the newspaper if someone gets arrested, because they haven't been convicted yet. And people are going to make a judgment about that person. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Back to the council. Yes.
So, I actually
Speaking.
sort of agree with both of you in a way, Mr. Landry and Pauline Gudis. In looking at the sort of examples of the state of Maine inspection reports, I mean, I like to consider myself a pretty intelligent person, and I have a hard time understanding what some of this means. So I understand what you're saying, Mr. Landry, in terms of educating the public. And I don't know that what the mayor was proposing was actually negotiating with restaurants. That's not exactly what it sounded like to me. It sounded like sort of trying to figure out a way to sort of make this more readable to a sort of person not in the restaurant industry, and sort of having that information online. So I just sort of wanted to clarify that.
Anyone else? Council Care?
Yeah, this is difficult because truly I agree with both of you. The analogy I disagree with on the arrest, because the city doesn't actually put that in the papers. The papers put that in the paper. Where this, the city would be creating a public document that's available on the World Wide Web. I'm not sure, Sue, if you could, how many restaurants in the city fail in a given year?
Sue. Sue.
And sounds like there's 2 levels of violations, like hand washing soap. You actually need 10 of them.
We have critical and non-critical.
Okay, so
And
hand
an
washing soap.
establishment fails if they have more than 10 non-critical or more than 3 critical.
All right. So
And that's pretty much defined on the inspection report. Usually, I think it's page 3. It'll state either hand washing section, no soap, or food contact surfaces not clean, and I'll specify what item it was. Was it a slicer, knives? Usually it'll be spelled out. But I just have to say something about the violations. Sometimes you can go into a kitchen and you'll go into wash your hands and the paper towels will be missing. There won't be a wait, I mean, there'll be something in front of the sink, like a delivery just comes in or whatever. That could be 2 violations right off the bat, because it's obstructing the hand sink, paper towels are missing. So that's 2 violations. So I think sometimes in Paul's case and other owners, they just think that sometimes you can have a violation, you can have up to 5 violations on one hand sink, which is possible. So, you know, that's 5 violations. You got, 6 more to go before you fail, and, things happen. I mean, it's just, you could have something in the back of the equipment that's dirty. There's just, it can add up. So it's, I think that's probably, and some people will look at a report and say, oh, they have 5 violations, I'm not going to go there to eat. And really, and those are probably non-critical. So it's a matter of, of interpretation of the public, whether they think that not having any paper towels and the hand sink being blocked is something that they're very concerned about and not going to go. So it's a matter of opinion, But as an inspector, I go in there and I just write what I see. And I test, and I try to work with the owners as much as I can. I don't like failing restaurants, but it does happen.
So just to wrap up my input, I think the absolute priority is public safety, not I think we are a business-friendly community. We've been that way for years. But in a decision like this, it has to be public safety and not what's best for the business. And whenever we can pull a group of people together and come up with a compromise, if we can do that, I think we absolutely always should do it, even if it makes this be postponed for a month or 2 before we make this decision. decision, so I'm very open to that if other councilors are, so.
I'd agree with that.
Councilor Chance?
To address Mr. Landry's concern, these documents in their entirety are available. It isn't just a pass-fail, and I've seen a few concerns that this was strictly a thumb-up, thumb-down page on the website. The viewer has the ability to come into City Hall and get the document, and they can see right on the front if it passes or fails, and choose to give it back and leave and say, I'm not going to go there. A lot of people don't have the time to take out during the day, during a work week, to go down to City Hall and pick up these documents. And this is 2014. In regards to transparency, a lot of these documents are available. These are public, as Ms. Gudis said, and simply making them easier to access in their entirety is important, that those be provided to the public, so each one of us can look and see if it's paper towels, hand soap, boxes obstructing a cleaning station. Things like that obviously are not critical. So I would basically reiterate that this is transparency. It's making public documents that are already available publicly available in a different way. I don't see this as an ordinance or any kind of policy change as far as what the city is doing, since these are public documents and publicly available. So I would state again that this is really not an ordinance change, it's not a policy change, it's making a public document available in another medium, easier to access for the public.
And I misspoke when I said ordinance, so, okay. Just to clarify that. Yes, Councilor.
I had a couple questions for Ms. Rennie. Did you say that in an average year you have about 10 restaurants?
Last year I did.
And would you say among those 10, how quickly were the problems rectified?
One of them was rectified within a couple of days. Usually I go back within 30 days, and if the owner wants me there sooner, I go back as soon as they want me back.
Great.
Because they want to, make sure that everything's okay.
Thank you. That's helpful, thank you. I think that really gets to my concern with this proposal. The fact that a negative inspection report could be posted on the web. The Sun Journal could certainly write a story the following day, and then those two items are out in the public forever. And the damage that it can do to a restaurant, even if they rectify the problem very quickly, I think is a bad policy for the city. I think the current format of the health inspection reports, if we were to put them up on the web, would not help many consumers in making their decisions about which restaurants to attend, because the reports themselves are very difficult to go through and understand. I think if this is something the council does want to move forward with, we should take our time. We should figure out how to present this information. I think Mr. Landry said if there's going to be a lot of attention on a failed restaurant, there should be an equal amount of attention given to a restaurant that passes or corrects the situation. But we all know what sells newspapers, and a second follow-up story on a restaurant, correcting the problems and passing their inspection, I don't think is very newsworthy, and I unfortunately don't think would help correct the damage that would have been done to that particular restaurant. I think our current system of evaluation and inspection works. It fulfills our public safety requirement. And so at this time, I would ask the council if there is interest in moving this forward, that we vote no on the motion before us, take some time to work on a better proposal, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilors? call the roll?
Well, before we call the roll, if I could, I mean, right now it's a coin toss on whether this passes, but I think your initial thoughts were worthy. So is there open for compromise on, pulling people together and trying to come up with something that would be acceptable to?
I would say that we've had a month to go over this, and we've laid out the template quite simply, and we do give, if this were implemented, equal time to passing or failing establishments. It's pass or fail. You can look at that report or the other report equally. There is no emphasis on one or the other. It's a very simple proposal. There's really no change in ordinance or policy. The documents are created when they're inspected currently. It's the same document, the same system that's been used for a number of years. I don't really know what we could do to compromise or move this in any other direction than to either make them available or to not make them available. They either are or they aren't. But once again, most people who work during the week and dine out during Friday, Saturday night don't have time to come down to City Hall and access these documents. So anyone that's had a bout of food poisoning can vouch for the unpleasantness of it. It's something that's extremely important for public health. So, as I said, I believe in this day and age, this is the internet age, everything is available. To not make these available in this manner would not help the public. And there is a transparency question that we're looking at here, and also a health question. So I would say, again, we either make these available or we do not make them available. They are public documents, and under the banner of transparency, the public does deserve to have access to these documents in a method that's a lot more convenient than it is currently.
Councilor Dubois?
Listening, I thought of my own personal experience and listening, and from the public, that I had heard through the grapevine, so to speak, from something that was printed in the paper that a local restaurant that I had dined in many times had failed, closed its doors. I don't have the time to come to City Hall and go through records to find it. I have not been back, and it's been quite a long time. I think if I had that information readily available to find out why it was closed, why it was failed, if they improved, and having that on the website would be able to give me that information that I needed to know. And I still haven't gone back, and I like the food there, so. Looking at it from that standpoint, I could see where it would be very valuable to have that information. And like Councilor LaChance did say, this is the age of electronics, emails, website. That's where everybody, truthfully, that I know goes to get information, not coming down to Town Hall and looking through the records and getting people to get that information for them.
Councilor Clucci?
I just want to reiterate, I agree with you, Councilor Dubois, and with you, Councilor LaChance. I just don't feel like the report in its current state is helpful.
I guess.
Councilor Dutry?
I mean, I guess that's the problem I have with it. I mean, and I think when we're talking about some kind of compromise, I don't think it's a compromise on what's going to be shown, but how do we educate people on how to read it? That's the problem. You know, you can put the information out there, but if people don't understand how to read it, there can be, misinterpretations of things, or, like was said, I mean, if something fails today but is corrected tomorrow, is only the most recent going to be up there? Are both of them going to be up there? I mean, there are little fine details that I'm just not comfortable with saying yes to this right now because of those fine details. I think there could be more discussion on how we go about it, and that could be something that we work with the restaurants on. How do we educate people on how to read it? You know, that's the kind of thing that we
So, is your question concerning how to read it? I look at a report, there's some examples we've been supplied with, and it seems pretty clear what the infractions are, and the minor ones are obviously minor. The more serious ones are noted as such. And also, the re-inspections would be posted from the template we have that Portland is using. Any re-inspection is posted, and if it passes, and it's right there. And you can see the corrective process as these go forward. So I don't quite see the concern in those two regards.
Well, I mean, if I can go back, I mean, just recently there was stuff posted in the Portland Press Herald, and I believe it mentioned Gritty's in Auburn, and it just said it was failed closed. Now, after seeing things on Facebook after with an explanation from Gritty's, they voluntarily closed themselves because of some kind of a fire, you know, but that's not explained there, that they voluntarily closed themselves. It just said in the report, failed closed. You know, so there's got to be other ways to explain those things that, you know.
So I would ask, does Auburn currently publish their health inspection reports? They do not.
No.
This is the Portland newspaper,
Right.
not the city of Auburn. If anyone saw that article in Gritty's and they wanted to find out exactly what was going on, if the city of Auburn published their reports, they could go on, find it, and say, hey, they passed, there isn't a problem here. By not having this on the website, we eliminate that possibility. So the questions will perpetuate until somebody goes down to City Hall during the week and finds these reports. So this is what we need to eliminate, the possibility of this happening, because that potentially could really have hurt Gritty's. In Lewiston's case, if these reports were available, a situation like that would come up, people could instantly find out. It says on the City of Lewiston website, Top Transparency website 2012. If we're not supplying this, I don't see how we can be the Top Transparency website. In the case of Gritty's, they would have been best served by the City of Auburn having these reports available, because that was a serious question, and it was a poorly written article that didn't help Gritty's at all. So I would argue that this is a case in point where making these available would have been the best possible solution to that problem.
Councilor Care.
But I think more than half of this council agrees with you that maybe some type of posting online would be acceptable, would work, would be a benefit to the public. But I think what we're saying is, as it's presented in this format, may not be acceptable to a majority of the council. So I think if people are willing to invite a couple of restaurant people, a couple of councilors, a couple of staff, within a couple of hours, I think a format that would be acceptable to the council, to the citizens in the community, and to the business owners could probably be found relatively easy, and hopefully would be acceptable to you, because you're the one who brought this to the forefront in one of the calls of transparency. So I truly think we're close if we can just set it aside for a little bit and invite those people to the table before we, you know, because otherwise I'm not convinced that this is going to pass, and then there will be no transparency, and that public safety won't be there.
A question for Ms. Rennie, if I may. Are these state forms? Is it a state law that requires you to fill out this particular form?
Yes.
Okay, is
It's the
there
Maine
any
Food- It's the Maine Food Code, Department of Health and Human Services, Center for Disease Control, and it's the Housing Inspection Program. And these forms were, as a matter of fact, they were just recently updated with the new food code.
Is there any alternative form that's acceptable to the state?
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Dote.
So I know we're basing this off Portland because Portland does this. Are there any other, and maybe you've seen this in your information, maybe Ed would know, are there any other cities that provide this information on their website? And if so, how do they do it?
I'm sure I could find many cities if I looked across the country. There may be others in Maine. I've only looked for Portland because that's the closest, most newsworthy
Gil
town.
may have some answers, yeah.
Good evening, Gil Arsenault, Director of Planning and Code. This is a 2013 food code. It's a bit complex, trying to educate people, the average citizen, as to what is in this document is probably an insurmountable situation. To a significant degree, Sue is an educator. The goal when Sue goes out and does inspections is to help, to educate, because for the most part, the people that we work with, the restaurant people, want to do what's right. There are only 5 communities in the state of Maine, as I'm aware of, that have memorandums of agreement with the State Department of Health and Human Services, and that's Auburn, Lewiston, Lisbon, Portland, and South Portland. So those are the only communities in the state of Maine that can lawfully do restaurant inspections. Nobody else in the state of Maine can do restaurant inspections other than the state of Maine. I've communicated with the state recently, and I'm certainly advocating the state to post restaurant inspections online. So it's a uniform, level playing field, and I don't really know why the state won't do it. It's not a very complicated task for us to do. But if we post, we're really going to be posting the inspection report. That's the inspection document that we have to use. People can look at it in its entirety. We can certainly have a link to this. Maybe there's some form of a disclaimer that we can put on the web as well. But there again, people are going to have to take the time to read it and to understand it as well. So if we're looking for a silver bullet, if we're looking for something that's going to somehow soften the blow, if you will, I don't think that exists. I mean, from a staff standpoint, we certainly don't have any issues with posting inspections. And I also should make it clear, too, that Sue can do an inspection, and she could find several violations at the hand wash sink, and she'll record those. Before she leaves a restaurant, they probably are corrected. So some inspections, some deficiencies are corrected while we're there. If it's a failed inspection, Sue will go back, like she said, in 30 days. If it's not a failed inspection, she'll go back next year. And certainly Lewiston and Auburn, and Lisbon for that matter, are very well served because Christy Bourget in Auburn, she also does Lisbon, and Sue and Lewiston are doing a great job for the citizens. And the restaurants, by and large, are outstanding. And certainly Fishbones is also one of my favorite restaurants as well.
So,
Hey, Council Calucci?
so Gil, just to clarify what you're saying, there's really sort of no compromise to be made here then?
I don't think so, because we have to use the inspection. We're not going to create another vehicle that sort of explains what the inspection is. I think for the most part, that's reasonably clear if you take the time to look at it. We don't really have the time to do everything that we do, because Sue not only does restaurant inspections, she's doing property maintenance inspections, she's doing curbside solid waste. I mean, we're doing a variety of things upstairs. And obviously, restaurant inspections and related inspections, lodging and whatnot, take a big part of her time. There are other hats that she's wearing. So I just didn't want the council to walk away thinking there was some, yeah, maybe we could try to explain things and have a couple of links, but the report is what the report is.
Any further comments from the council? Questions? Going once, going twice? Call the roll?
Counsel from Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
No.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
No.
Ward 3?
No.
Motion passes by a vote of 4 to 3.